Welcome to the Holy Sparks podcast. I am so excited today. I got my good friend here, Mr. Isaac Zones. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to enjoy this one for sure. But without further ado, let me go ahead and edify the man properly. Isaac Zones is a San Francisco Bay Area based musician specializing in Jewish spiritual, folk, and family music. Isaac teaches music classes, leads prayer services, officiates life cycle events, and song leads for community events, weddings, camps, concerts, corporate events, and everything in between. Isaac learned to play guitar as a counselor at Camp Tawonga in 2001 and has been on staff almost every summer since. Isaac was born and raised in San Francisco and was bar mitzvahed under the tutelage of Rabbi Alan Liu, Zichron Livracha. He graduated from Lowell High School and went on to graduate from Pomona College as a religious studies major and mathematics minor. Isaac wrote his graduate thesis on American Jewish identity through the lens of comedy. In 2005, Isaac became the founding director of the Moishe House and one of the inaugural residents. He helped the young adult peer-led program get off the ground and on its way to now boasting well over 100 houses in more than 25 countries. In 2020, Isaac won the Diller Jewish Educator Award for Excellence in Jewish Communal and Experimental Learning. Experiential
That should have said
learning.
experiential.
Got it. In collaboration with fellow Bay Area kids musician Melita Silberstein, Isaac has 2 albums of Jewish family music that have been distributed internationally by the PJ Library. Both albums have won Parents' Choice Awards and chosen from a pool of music across all genres. You can find this under the artist name Melita and Isaac. Isaac also plays bigger shows with his Jewish jam band Shamati. In addition to holiday dance parties and festivals, the band frequently plays for weddings, B'nai Mitzvot parties, and other Simcha celebrations. So ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together for my good friend, Isaac Zones. Oh,
Thank you.
ladies and gentlemen, no, that's how we do it. Louder in the back, in the back. That's how we do it.
It's okay. You can sit down.
Oh my God. Oh, they're excited. They heard about you. Okay, oh, calm down. Oh my gosh, they're excited. They're excited. They're excited. All right,
Yeah,
what's happening, my friend?
a
Well,
wild fan base, so people are into you.
I tell you what, I think they're into you actually, is
All
what it
right,
really
all right,
is. So,
all right.
welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Good, good. Glad to be here, Sal. Thanks for inviting me.
Glad to have you, my man. Okay, so for people that don't really know so much about you, I know I mentioned it briefly in your bio.
Yeah,
Talk a little bit about your upbringing, and we're going to talk really 2 streams today. One is Jewish, one is music, and then we're going to bring them together. So talk about your Jewish upbringing, and also, I don't know if your bio mentioned Brandeis, but you can weave that in there as well so people can kind of get to know you.
yeah. I was born and raised in San Francisco. Funny enough, my parents were both they both grew up in the Bay Area too, but were very assimilated. My mom didn't even know she was Jewish. The story she tells is that she was like 10 years old. She grew up in Palo Alto, and her and her like neighborhood friends were throwing rocks at the new kids. And her brother was like, "What are you doing that for?" And she's like, "Oh, because they're Jewish." And he was like, he grabbed her and he's like, "You're Jewish too. Like, don't do that," basically. And that's how she found out she was Jewish. But she didn't. I mean, it wasn't a part of her identity. I think until her 30s when she kind of like started deciding to like learn more about it and to take it on for herself. And she said she knew my dad for 2 years before she found out he was Jewish. So anyway, this is just a taste of
Wow.
how assimilated they both grew up. But they decided to send me to a Jewish day school because they wanted me to have more of a understanding of my Jewish identity and more, Jewish education. And I went to Brandeis um, uh, Hillel Day School in San Francisco for elementary school, and then I went to public schools after that. But yeah, it was actually pretty fun for me to like learn Hebrew and prayers and bring them home and be able to know something that my parents didn't know. It was kind of exciting and fun, and to actually be like the teacher for them. So for me, yeah, I loved growing up at Brandeis. I loved growing up Jewish. I will say, my mom, she before I went to Brandeis, she also enrolled me in a program that like Mimi Greisman led, who's like a local music hero around here. But she was somebody who was an educator for me growing up. Um, anyway, I loved the community there, and I, I was a little bit like a teacher's pet kind of kid, and and we had to like once a year our class would lead to fila for the school, and so I was like singing louder than everybody in class, and trying to make sure the probably the Israeli Hebrew teacher was like happy with the job that I was doing. So I think that's a little bit how I got my start connected to Jewish music. Um, I'll
And
say
you
a
were
couple
there,
other,
but
yeah,
just real quick, you were there K through 8 the entire time?
just through elementary school, and then I went to public schools after that.
Okay.
But it's funny enough, we never belonged to a synagogue until a neighbor moved across the street who were pretty relatively from, and they were part of a conservative synagogue, Beth Shalom in San Francisco,
Hmm.
and where Rabbi Lou was the head rabbi, and they recruited us to join the synagogue, and that's where I had my bar mitzvah, and that's how I kind of got connected and really learned a lot more about conservative Judaism at that point in my life. And then after I was 15, I went to Israel on a big program with a bunch of teens and had a really kind of turning point for me around my identity, and even like kind of started to change my social life. Most of my friends were Asian actually at that point, based on the schools I was going to in San Francisco, and then I made a lot of friends that were Jewish on that trip and started hanging out with them a little bit more. And I still have like a full life with lots of different types of people, but that was when I started to really have more of a Jewish social life. Was after that trip to Israel. Um, and then I guess I'll just keep going. I followed a girlfriend who I met on that Israel trip to work at Camp Tawonga, and that's where I really fell in love with being Jewish. Like, it was the first time I saw people kind of being Jewish in a joyful, like joyful Judaism, I call it or think of it.
Hmm.
And specifically, it was our first. It was like training week for staff. And Friday night after Shabbat dinner, there was like this, big freilach, they call it, a big like song session, and I was a little bit on the sidelines, just feeling it out as a new person. And I got pulled in by some other guys who I didn't really know, into like a huddle of guys with their arms around each other, and there was like anyway, it was just like wow, I'd never seen. I kind of never experienced anything like that musically, and much less with like Hebrew as the backdrop for that music. So that was definitely a lot of explosions went off in my head at that point, and that's the summer that I learned to play guitar and kind of started transitioning towards being a musician.
Cool. And that you were 15, yeah?
That summer I was 19,
Oh, okay.
15 when I went to Israel, and 19 when I went to Camp Tawonga.
Okay. And you had never been to Jewish summer camp prior to that.
I never had. No, I was like I was all about baseball growing up. I went to a lot of baseball camps.
Hmm.
I was I did play baseball my first year of college and had kind of a discouraging experience, and so that was after that summer. I was supposed to be like weightlifting all summer, and I decided I'm done with this, and I followed the girlfriend I had at the time to go work at Camp Tawonga, and I think the void that I had left behind with baseball, I started to fill with guitar and music. And that first year, I probably learned 150 songs. Like I was something was like lit within me.
Mm,
It was definitely the most growth and learning I have ever had as a musician that one year.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So this is a good little segue, but interesting that from what I'm hearing, sounds like you really picked up guitar at 19. Is that
I
accurate?
did, yeah.
So there
And yeah,
was there
I
music before that, or had you played at
I
all?
uh I did Suzuki method violin for 6 years, from
Okay.
second grade to eighth grade, which mostly I hated and fought with my mom a lot about. And but I do and my mom played. She would accompany me on piano, and my dad actually played some guitar, and there was always music on the house. My mom was classical, and my dad was mostly jazz and like Carlos Santana.
Oh,
um,
cool. Very Bay
and
Area.
yeah, and but I do think that I got like I think between the singing at Jewish day school and then the violin, I got like kind of a some ear training through all of that,
For
um,
sure. Yeah.
which helped me later in life.
For
But
sure. And for
and
people not familiar with the Suzuki method, it's basically ear training, right, for
yeah,
a long time and then eventually leads to reading music. Is that accurate?
yeah. So
Mhm.
I had like colored little tape on my violin, and then like ways that I was like learning to read the notes that was more about colors and numbers than it was about like actually reading notes on a sheet music. And I played in the orchestra for like a year or two in my middle school, and was had to learn sheet music, and that was tough. I just didn't like any of it, to be honest. And then my junior year in high school, I had to do like an arts class, and I joined the choir, and I skyrocketed to like the chamber choir, like whatever the head thing was.
What does
Because
that
I
mean? For
like
people who don't know what that means.
what it means is like I joined just a normal class, and the
Okay.
teacher identified me as a good singer, and he was like, "Oh, I want you to be in this other thing that like meets after school."
Mm.
And I got so it, I mean, funny enough, what it was is basically I just sang Christmas music for 2 months. We were like, it was like a choir that we probably did like 20 performances in San Francisco in various locations, but all like Christmas music, and I ended up singing a song in our like winter recital that was like, "He died to save us," like that kind of stuff.
Oh, classic. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Well, there are some Jewish composers in the Christmas repertoire, so it's
That's
all
true.
connected.
That's
Um, okay, great. And so that's nice. So you definitely had a really musically supportive, loving environment, both with your mom and your dad, which is great. I share that for sure. Both my parents they love music, right? They just love it, right? And so that love of music is definitely in your home. So let me ask you a question. Did you at any point consider becoming what I call, a secular musician, maybe going the pop route or the folk route or anything like that?
you know, that's a good question. It was always well. Okay, let me just say, I still like I'm 41 now, and I'm still kind of like taking on the identity of a musician, even though it's been like my full time work for 15 years. Because it just wasn't part of who I was growing up. So I don't think I ever thought in my head like, oh, this is a career or this is something that I want to be like central in my life. I almost feel like I fell into it backwards a little bit.
Mhm.
But there was a point where I was a little like, oh, I wonder if I could make it, or I wonder if I could be successful, or like someone like Bob Dylan. I'm like, oh, it's amazing that he writes these lyrics and they connect with people and they're so inspiring. Could I do something like that? And I don't know if you remember this, but at one point, I think it was early on in me meeting you. You gave me 7 hours of audio.
Oh my gosh. I think you're the only person to make it all the way through that. But no, go
Well,
tell people
I
about
there
it.
was 1 hour that was about touring musicians, and I was like, I don't think I'm ready for this part yet. But I listened to the other 6 hours, and one of them you went through and described like 20 types of venues that you could play in, and it was
Mhm.
like number one, like bars and clubs. And I remember you're like, your job here is to sell alcohol, even if it just means you dragging a chair back and forth across the stage, and somehow they sell more alcohol, they will invite you back for this gig. And then you
100%
got to like
accurate.
number 13, like houses of worship. And I was just like, oh my God, that sounds so much better than all the other things that you're describing. And I was like, maybe I'm just in the right spot and I don't need to like to kick the tires on the other types of music careers I could have.
You saved yourself from years of pain and suffering that I went through on your behalf to create that audio. I don't even know what it's
Exactly.
called or if I ever even released it, but it was like 7 hours of, I don't know, the business of music or something. So
It, it,
thank you.
I
Glad I
soaked it up.
helped.
It was like exactly what I needed at the time of my life, and I think it helped me probably save years of experimentation. So thank you, Saul, for that.
My pleasure. Happy to suffer for the people. Um, okay, so that kind of, maybe not necessarily just listen to that, but you thought about it and you decided, actually, no, I'm going to stay in the Jewish lane. Or really, what was your kind of your final verdict on all that?
It's funny. I had a job working in public schools, and then I had another job where I was working for Moishe House.
Mm.
And at some point, I started getting asked to do more like Jewish music gigs, and I think initially I wasn't that interested. And then somebody was like, "Oh, we'll pay you $150," and I'm like, "All right, I'm there." Like that was what got me.
The big
But
bucks. Yep.
exactly, exactly. But at some point, I was like, "Okay, I'm going to take a leap of faith and try to do this full time." And actually, Alana, your wife, she had just gotten her job at PTBE Bethel and in San Mateo, and she was leaving a job at Music Together where she had been a music teacher, and she recruited me. We didn't know each other that well, but she somehow recruited me to take her spot. I think she felt bad that she was leaving. And I worked there for about a year and a half. It's actually like the only job I ever got fired from, which is a whole nother story. But
What is music together for people that don't know because it's
music
still
to
around?
yeah, it's like music classes for kids and often parents or sometimes nannies, but it's like an adult and a child or together, and it's really good. It comes from a lot of research based background, and it really taught me how to be a good music teacher for young people, and it's shaped a lot of what I still do, especially for families. um, but the thing I was going to say about it is it was the one job that I had where I was working with a lot of people who weren't Jewish, and it was in a very wealthy neighborhood and a lot of entitlement and stuff. And I think that was a little bit of a, and as I mentioned, I got fired from that job, but that was like,
Wait, wait,
I think
wait,
that
wait. Come on. How did you get fired? What did you do?
it
Tell
wasn't
us.
my fault. The yeah, what happened was, you know, they made their music together, made their money because they would charge an arm and a leg for the songbooks and the CDs, and the person who owned this franchise had to pay Music Together a lot of money for those, and they were very tight on trying to keep track of them. And in my classes, there were some families that had two kids, and I was accidentally giving them two CDs and two songbooks when they would sign up. And that was, I didn't know it at the time, but it was a big no-no. And
The
and
Shonda. Oh, the chutzpah.
and
Giving them more materials.
exactly. And
Okay, okay.
when the person found out, they were really upset, and they treated it like I had been stealing from them or something. So, but
Mm,
just
okay.
to say, it was the one job I had where I was working outside the Jewish community, and I just didn't like it. It didn't feel like family. I didn't feel like I was part of the group in the same way. So
Mm,
yeah.
got it. Okay. So music together. So, and then at what point did you really, in a sort of a more full-time way, take this on? Say, okay, I'm going down this Jewish path musically, and what did that look like in terms of what you were doing at that time?
Yeah. Well, okay, so um, at some, I was working for Moishe House. I think I had one year where I worked part time for Moishe House, and I was doing some of these music gigs on the side. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to take a leap of faith. I actually remember I was getting recruited to work at the Jim Joseph Foundation based on my Moishe House job, and they asked me to come in for like a informational interview kind of thing. And I basically told the woman, I was like, I'm gonna just do music full time. Like, I don't want a suit and tie job anymore. And she was like looking at me like I was crazy. Like, why would I turn this opportunity down? But I was like sure that this is something I wanted to try.
Mm,
And it's funny. I was living off of my expectations of how much money I was going to make at the time was very low, and so I was able to, I don't know, work 20 hours a week, and that was like enough for me to make what I all I wanted to make. And I took a lot of classes in San Francisco. I had this great resource called the Community Music Center. I think I was pretty aware that I didn't have an education in music the way that I wanted to and that I needed to. So I was like in a beginning jazz workshop there, and it was funny because I was probably 25 or 26 at the time, and it was like me and all retirees. So it'd be like a class
I love
like
it.
me, yeah, and everybody else is like 70 to 85, like.
Nice.
um, but I made friends with the teachers, and I think they saw a potential in me that maybe they felt like they weren't getting teaching the older crowd as much. But I was taking private guitar, I was taking a lot of piano, voice lessons, all of it, and I learned a ton,
Mm,
and I think I grew a lot musically, um, and that really helped kind of. I think that helped me get better at being a stronger musician, and and trying to make myself better. Um, and then I think the next stage for me was in 2013. A friend of mine that I had made at Camp Tawonga, Nathaniel Markman, who
mhm, mhm,
recruited me to be in this band Shamati. And that was really my first time being in a band and playing with other musicians. And I learned, well, it's been, I guess this will be 10 years this year that we've been together, but I've met a lot of musicians through that, and have learned basically how to like communicate with other musicians and how to lead a band, and have grown a lot musically. I mean, everybody who's in that band I think of as being way more talented than I am. And
Jordan and Ben, and who's the drummer?
Craig Miller, with
Okay.
he's the drummer for La Misa Negra. But you probably know Ezra, who like will sub for him sometimes, from
Cool.
ALO.
Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's just very talented musicians, as you know. You played with us one time for Purim. I don't know if you remember
I do. It was porn, but I still remember it. Yep.
that.
Okay, real quick, because you mentioned Moishe House, and there may be a lot of people that actually don't know what that is. So just for a second, just talk about what that is, because I think there's a certain, age group that really speaks to.
Yeah. So Moishe House is at its core, it's a bunch of young adult Jews who live together and create community out of their house through their own social networks. So when I some friends of mine were living in Oakland, and it was four Jewish guys who lived together, and they were already having like Shabbat dinners and stuff. And at the time I was working for this guy David Siegelman, who's now the head of Moishe House, or the CEO or whatever his title is, and he basically approached them and said, "What if we like subsidized your rent and gave you some money like to pay for food and have a budget, and essentially like take what you're already doing and kind of like turn it into a program," was sort of the origins of it. And then I had a few friends, like I was living at home at the time. I had a friend who was living in his dad's office, like on the couch, and they caught wind of it, and they were like, "Hey, we should do that too." So I think we even started maybe a month after this group in Oakland. We were in San Francisco, um, and because I was working for David at a the Forest Foundation was the name of it. It was a whole nother story. He was like, "Hey, you're living in a Moishe house. There's no rules right now. Like, I need you to like figure out how to create rules and a structure and stuff." And so I got to kind of dream big about like what's possible for young adult community, and like what and kind of how to support people. But at the same time, I was also like asking people to submit pictures online of their events so that there was like some evidence that they happened, and taking care of all the receipts and stuff like that. So David basically was like, "Hey, this is going well, and we're getting funding for this." He's like, "I want you to start a new house every 2 months." When we first started, so I
Wow.
went up to Seattle and I met some people who were interested. I went to Philadelphia. I think I even over the phone started a house in Montevideo, Uruguay, and yeah, I don't know.
And
It was a cool job.
love it. And Moshe House, it still exists now, yes? And
Yeah,
it's
there's
really
yeah.
sort of the people like that are in college or kind of fresh out of college. That's kind of the mostly the age, or
I think it's yeah, like I'm sure they have some official parameters, but I think it's like folks in their 20s primarily. It might be more into their 30s now too. I'm not sure. Yeah.
young millennials into their 42. No, okay, got it. Love it. Okay, that's great. And definitely, yeah, look up Moishe House if you haven't heard about it. They do some great things for sure. And it's just a nice way to like almost just create community, I mean, it exactly is creating community for that age group, which is their people are like going in a lot of different directions and like, hey, here, let's create a little home base for you. So I think it's really sweet in that regard. So one thing I wanted to talk about and have you reflect back, which is, we're here in the Bay Area, which I love its diversity, and I love the fact that it's really what I would describe as a great example of Jewish pluralism. Like there's everything here. I mean, maybe not, you know,
There's a lot. There's a lot.
maybe not a lot of like Breslov Hasidism, but outside of that, there's pretty much everything here. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on that experientially and also in your work. And then I have
Yeah.
a couple other questions for you about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny, like I mentioned, I grew up in kind of this odd Jewish experience too, where I was like teaching my parents about how to be Jewish, essentially. And my wife is Chicana, she would describe herself as, but as like Mexican American. She was born in the LA area, raised Catholic, has not converted to Judaism, but took a year of Hebrew classes, and we've been to Israel together, and we have a 4-year-old that we're raising Jewishly. All to say that I, also have like a very blended Jewish family. With lots of interesting conversations and negotiating to figure out like what that looks like and how to set it up. Um, I love it. I mean, I here's what I'll say is that I think there's a lot of people who have decided, just because I'm not doing Judaism the way that I was supposed to do it or told to do it, doesn't make it like less legitimate or less Jewish or something like that. So I think there's a lot of people taking ownership of their Judaism and taking initiative around building Jewish community, and and sort of pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and and making it kind of their own. And I guess for me personally, I've sort of helped participate in those ways musically primarily. Um, I'll say about my family that we're part of a group called Olamim, which is like a Spanish-speaking Jewish community for families and kids. Like our son only speaks Spanish,
Wow.
um, and so a lot of the Jewish programming that we've been trying to do for him, we've been trying to do it in Spanish. So like that's something I don't know if it exists elsewhere, for instance.
Amazing.
Um,
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
well,
Where can
I
people
would
find
imagine
out
it.
about that? Because I've never
Yeah,
heard about it.
yeah. Um, I guess there's a lot of Spanish-speaking Jews in Spanish-speaking countries, but in the U.S., probably not as many.
Oh, but that program is not unique to the Bay Area. It's a larger program, or is it?
I think it's Bay Area based. I only know about programs in the Bay Area, but I think they're trying to connect, on a broader scale and maybe trying
Mm,
to figure things out. Um, I just know, we hosted a Tu B'Shvat Seder in Spanish at our house in February, with
sweet.
6 or 7 or 8 families, something like that. Um, so for me musically, what's interesting is at this point, a lot of work that I'm doing is related to people doing independent uh, bar bat mitzvah, b'nai mitzvot ceremonies,
Hmm.
in a park or at uh, like a venue of some kind. And in some cases, I'm showing up and playing the music for those. In other cases, I'm kind of like coaching the families and how to prepare mentally and emotionally, as well as like actually plan the service,
Hmm.
and help them kind of get prepared in all those ways. And those are things that I don't know if they. I was talking to somebody recently who was like, "Oh yeah, that's not a job in Boston," you know, like I don't know how much there's like that kind of independence or people kind of taking it on themselves in other places. So I think I feel fortunate in that sense that I'm here and getting to participate.
I love it. Well, I will say yes, there are independent B'nai Mitzvot happening all over the country for sure. I know people that that's all they do. That is like
Yeah.
their Parnassa, and they travel around the country doing so. Yes, for sure. I don't know how much in Boston per se, but for sure it's happening. And I love that, and I participate a lot in that as well. So, okay, so people could actually reach out to you if they were interested in having an independent B'nai Mitzvah. That's something that you do,
Yeah.
whether on the sort of facilitating or just coaching the student along the way, or actually playing the ceremony itself.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Often I'll either work with a separate officiant and do the music, or sometimes do both the officiating and the music. I haven't been doing the tutoring, so usually I partner with somebody else to do the tutoring aspect of it.
for the trope and stuff. Okay,
Yep.
cool. So, which actually brings me to another question that I was very interested to understand from you. So, you do all these things. You're a cantorial soloist. I don't know if that's your official title in different communities, but you're essentially, you're leading worship and you're doing the music. Have you ever thought about getting smicha as a cantor in a particular movement? Why or why not?
I definitely thought about it. Part of it was going to places like Havana Shira or Song Leader Boot Camp and seeing lots of cantors and clergy and talking to people and being inspired by many of them. And thinking like, okay, this would be a chance for me to deepen my career and my learning in particular. Um, and I interviewed several people, kind of like with the like, should I figure out how to do this or not? I ended up deciding at this point not to. I think for several reasons, um, and they're kind of varied, and it's still one of those things I haven't made a firm decision around in my mind. But I had one friend who basically was like, I think that to be clergy, it should be a calling, like that you should feel like this is kind of what's your purpose in life, or something that like is connected to a higher power around the decision. And I didn't feel that, and so I think there was something that spoke to me about that, and I felt like, okay, well maybe I can make a career doing what I'm doing without having to without deciding to like be officially clergy. Um, so that was something that made an impression on me. I will say, I mean, in all honesty, I'm married to a woman who's not Jewish and isn't planning to convert, and I know that um, that's complicated and sticky, and I don't know if I necessarily like couldn't have had a big Jewish life as a clergy member with her as my partner, but I know that is like a question that gets asked as part of the admissions process. I
Oh,
don't
I
know
heard
where.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's not universally true in every program. Just there are some programs. Like,
yeah,
like
the
for
mo-
example, well, I don't know this to be 100% true, so we may
yeah.
edit this out later, but I don't think with the Olive program it's like that.
You
Right.
could be right, and I know that
Yeah.
when Alana started the Olive program, I started to look hard at that too because that looked
Yeah.
interesting, and that was the other thing is like I couldn't really imagine moving somewhere for 5 years away from the Bay Area. At the time that I was looking at it, that sort of seemed like the programs I would have been looking at that would have required me. And the truth is, I was like enjoying what I was doing already, and I was feeling like the momentum of it, and I didn't want to stop.
I love
Um,
it. Yeah, and
yeah,
you are essentially doing all of the things that a cantor would do,
yeah,
except for dealing with a board, right? So
yeah.
there's that,
Yeah.
which
I
is
I mean I'm not doing pastoral counseling, and that's something I feel like could be a little bit out of my scope. And there are times that I get into situations where people want to have really intense discussions with me about God that I feel a little like, oh, I wish I'd had a little more training around this. And I don't know, I don't know if people are getting that kind of training necessarily. Maybe it's just through experience that you do. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that, and I feel like I haven't had like as much deep Jewish learning around studying Torah and Talmud um, as people probably would be expected to going through those kinds of programs. So I do feel like, yeah, there's some differences, but I will say I've got a lot of experience, and that I really I value, and I've learned a lot, and I think that that's actually my favorite way to learn, is to learn on the job, so to speak, like to learn through experience.
100% with you on that, my brother.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. So, well, and paths change, right? People do things later in life. It's all good, and you're doing the
yeah,
holy work. And I think everyone that I've interviewed and every other Jewish person I've ever met in my entire life has felt like, gosh, I should learn more. I need to learn more. And this is good. This is like,
yeah,
it's aspirational feelings, which I think are super positive. I feel that way about Hebrew every day.
yeah,
I need to learn more. I need to do better. I need to keep up with my 8-year-old that's almost fluent. Like this is real.
yeah,
Okay, so speaking of which, a quick Hebrew question for you. And now I thought that you were actually the founding member of Shemati, but I guess Nathaniel was. So
yeah.
here my question is: Shemati means I hear you, but it's a band. So why isn't it Shemanu?
Oh, interesting. Well, I'll give you the origin of how we got the name, but maybe we should consider changing it. The And it's past tense, right? It's like I heard you, and Shamanu, I guess, would be we heard you. The We started with the band, and this was Nathaniel's idea. Our first gig we played for Wilderness Torah Sukkot on the Farm Festival. We had a band named Tavat Tava, which was the name of the wilderness department at Camp Tawonga. And what I was told is it means nature's treasure chest. So it's like kind of a play on words
Like
in Hebrew.
Hateva, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But basically, no one could say it. No one could remember it. It didn't work. And Nathaniel had put us together as a band, and he knew all the musicians, but none of us knew each other. So we were really I think we did 4 rehearsals before that first gig. We were really just getting to meet each other and get to know each other. But as part of that, he would have us go around and say something about our lives. And at the end of it, we would say Dibarti, and everybody else would say Shamati. Which I think in the circles that he was in, that was like a common thing, right? Like I have
Yeah.
spoken, and everybody's like, I have heard you. It's a little bit of like a spiritual kind of thing, and so that was like I think one of the few things at that point in our relationships that we had in common was kind of like and Nathaniel was I think used to that, but then none of the rest of us were used to it, so it was a little bit like funny and silly and awkward. But it was a little bit like a I don't know. I would want to say like an in joke for us or something, but it was like a something we had in common. So, and I was like, this people could spell this, they could remember it, like they can say it. So, I was like, why don't we try this? And he was a little nervous that it would feel like offensive to some of the people who that ritual was like more sacred. Um, but I mean sometimes I think of it as like a namaste for for Hebrew. Um,
Right. I've done that, you would say Debarti, I would say Shemati. It's all good.
yeah.
One. Um,
Let me say quickly though that a lot of people think it's Shmata as the band, which is like a dirty rag in Yiddish, and so
really? Oh no.
we've had a lot of people like, "Why would you name yourself Shmata?"
You could have been Shamati, but you're
And
Shmata.
pre-pandemic, I went as far as to make like band logos on handkerchiefs, to sell
Oh,
like
nice.
Shamati Shmatas, which I think we sold all of like 1 or 2 total, but not a hot item.
I love it. I love it. Okay, well, to be continued, the evolution of the name. And then just real quick on Shamati, you guys play weddings and simchas and I heard stadium concerts as well on your website. So what's going on with all that?
Well, the stadium concert is a joke because we've done the national anthem a few times for the A's for Jewish Heritage Night, and yeah, it was funny. Our first time we did it, it was against the Royals on like a Tuesday night, and there was 8,000 people there, which was by far the most people I'd ever sung in front of. But in a stadium that fits like 60,000, it felt like there was nobody there. And then the subsequent years we got to do it, it was with the Dodgers and the Yankees, and there was like 30 to 40,000 people at the time that the game started. So that felt like intimidating and exciting. You've done national anthem.
I have. It was literally the most nervous I've ever been for anything in my life except for the birth of my children. Because I know this podcast is not about me, but I had 48 hours notice basically to sing in front of the Warriors during like their peak season, 19,000 people. And you think you know the national anthem until you actually sing it and realize how hard that melody is. And it's also Old English. So I'm thinking, okay, great. There's going to be lyrics on a giant, prompter. Everyone will sing, and no, exactly the opposite. You're literally standing around these giant humans for basketball. Like, even Steph Curry 6'2", I'm still looking up to him. Like everyone is just huge, and the crowd goes completely silent, and there's a spotlight on you. And like I almost had a complete panic attack. Like it was so scary, but thank God it worked out, and the fireworks went off, and it was great. But if you are a musician listening to this, I always tease my wife, you got to do it. You have to. It's just a rite of passage.
Yeah.
So.
We made a short little video of our experience doing the national anthem the first time, and it actually was interesting. Is it was right in the controversy of Colin Kaepernick taking a knee for the national anthem, and Donald Trump, making a whole scene of it, and we had this like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And I ended up getting shirts made that said "Jews for Black Lives Matter." And we all had the shirts on, but it was funny. We were nervous about the national anthem. We were also nervous about wearing those shirts, and we ended up. I think we had sweatshirts on, and then kind of at the last minute, we like took our sweatshirts off, and the person who was like our liaison for the A's was like, "Oh no, you can't wear that." They kind of freaked out. I think they're sure they were like worried about their job, and we ended up kind of like having the sweatshirts on like on the side of like we are trying to show off the shirts, but trying to like make this person feel better by having our sweatshirts on. Anyway, it was a little bit of a bizarre thing, but we made a short YouTube video that's pretty fun and captures I think some of the nervousness ahead of time too.
I love it. Yeah, no, there's a video of it as well. It's a great experience. I actually like seriously have PTSD even when I talk about it. I get nervous even now. It's like,
I'm
no, it's
sorry to
not.
bring it up.
No, I think it's great. It's a great experience. Okay, so hopefully we have enough time for you to play a song. I don't know. Can you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. Cool.
You're listening to the Holy Sparks podcast, as is customary.
All
Oh,
right. So
by the way, you got to
yeah.
talk at some point about with this like thesis about experiencing Jewish life with humor. I think that's brilliant, and you
Okay.
share some
Good.
of that.
And anyway, I got another thing I want to talk about too. So this song, I feel like a lot of times I've written music, it's because I saw a performance or I listened to something that inspired me. But I would listen to, anyway, somehow I started to think like, what if Sam Cooke were to write like a prayer, for Shabbat. And so this is, Ahavat Olam, a great love or an everlasting love. And this is a little bit my midrash in the voice of Sam Cooke, is like how I like to think about it. We'll start with the chorus if I can get there. Let's see. Love, love, and love, love, and love, and love, and love. Ahavat olam. Love and love and love, love and love and love and love. Beit Yisrael. Amcha Avta. Everlasting love, it's bigger than me, it's bigger than you, it's bigger than we. Everlasting love, can we comprehend a love with no beginning, a love with no end? And we sing love, 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 love. Ahavat olam. Love, 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 love. Beit Yisrael. Amcha Avta. Everlasting love means each one of us, from the menshiest mentions to the meshuggahs. Everlasting love. Now what would it mean to know you've always been loved, you've always been seen? And we sing love and love and love, love and love and love and love. Avan olam. Love and love and love, love and love and love and love. Beit Yisrael Amcha Avta. Don't be afraid of what the dark may bring. Have faith in the love. Continue to sing. For after all, the sun always rises in the morning. We sing love and love and love, love and love and love and love. Avan olam. Love and love and love, love and love and love and love. Beit Yisrael Amcha Avta. Everlasting love.
Oh, sweet. That was sweet, my man. I
I
love it.
thought you
I
might
love
like
it.
that one, Saul.
Oh, I was singing harmonies in the background. It's great.
So
Um,
I had an April Fool's joke lined up that I completely forgot about. I
uh,
was
in
here,
advance? Okay.
let's rewind for a second. Why don't you tell me, like, okay, it's time for you to play a song.
Boy, the timing on this joke. Okay. Hey, time for you to play a song, my man.
All right, this is a new setting to O Say Shalom that I've just written. O Say Shalom, Bimromav. All right, that's Alana's version of O Say Shalom, which I play way more than I ever play any of my own music.
Oh, classic. All right.
Anyway, sorry, it would have been better timing. It would have been funnier.
It's all good. We can edit it. So thank you for that. That was beautiful. I was singing harmonies. Yeah, I definitely uh I got an album I want to talk to you about for sure. We definitely share some
Okay.
common influences. I love that 60s soul stuff, and anything Sam Cooke is good by me. But you are in the middle of fundraising for a really cool, exciting project. I want to make sure we give you a kavod on that and talk about that and let people know what you're doing.
Yeah, so our band about a year ago played a wedding, and the brother of the bride was there and was really inspired. And there, that's a family that's like American Israelis. The parents are Israeli, but they grew up here in the U.S. And they he, I think, had, I don't know, he felt just really inspired by the hora and the mayim and zemaratik and the different Israeli folk dancing that, we were leading it, but we also kind of have a little edge and a little you know, we just kind of blend it with different genres a little bit. And he waited a few months to decide if he really, how he felt about it. And then he reached out to us and said, hey, he is a documentary filmmaker, and he said, I think there could be a cool documentary kind of centered around your band, but, learning a little bit more about what you guys do around horror music and around this is really folk dance, kind of in the, the little twist you have on it, but also maybe taking you guys to Israel and getting to meet the people who like wrote the songs that you're singing, the people who are now in their 80s and getting older. And so that's kind of the premise for this documentary. And right now we're doing a Kickstarter to raise enough money to get us to Israel and and essentially shoot all the footage that would take place in Israel. And then we'll have to kind of do more fundraising to do all the editing and stuff like that. We're off to a great start. Our fundraiser, we're like 60-70% of the way there, and we've got like another month to go. You can find the fundraiser if you're interested and learn more about it at ihearyouFilm.com. So ihearyouFilm.com. I Hear You is kind of, a reference to Shamati, as we talked about with the band before. I guess I think it's a working title for now, but ihearyouFilm.com will take you to the Kickstarter. You can see a really nice trailer of, kind of some ideas of what the movie will be like, and you'll see some fun stuff about our band. And yeah, and we've already started to get some interest in people who want to become like investors in the film. So I don't, we're figuring out how that could take shape and what that would look like. But it has a lot of momentum right now and could end up turning into a much bigger project than we had initially envisioned.
I love it. And so do you already have the dates that you're going to Israel?
We're planning to go in July, kind of mid-July. So we're doing the fundraising now. Hopefully the Kickstarter is one of those models where it's like all or nothing, right? So we gotta get across
Yeah,
the
wow.
finish line. But we're planning to go in July, and hopefully that'll the time that we have allotted will be enough time for us to get all the footage that we have there. It's possible if we get a bigger budget and investors that we might end up making a second trip or something.
Amazing, amazing. By Hashkacha Prati, my family will be there at the exact same time. So
Oh, really?
we'll have a cup of coffee. How cool would
All
that
right, I love that.
be? I love it. Okay, so great. So go to ihearyouFilm.com.
That's right.
You
Yep.
can also probably get there through your website, isaaczones.com.
I actually don't have anything about the Kickstarter on my website, but I should look. I should get into that.
Okay, okay.
Good tip. Another tip from Saul.
Okay, and you can also, if you go to the Kickstarter website and search, yeah,
Mm,
it's also another way to do it. So, but
yeah.
there'll be links below this video or in the podcast description that you can check out. Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, I know we both have to go, but the question I always ask everyone is, what do you feel the Jewish world needs now most, and why?
Um, I've heard you ask this on some of your other guests with the podcast, so I was a little bit thinking about it, and I'm not going to sing "What the World Needs Now." Um, I it, I think it's probably in part because of the family that I have and the relationship that I'm in, but I really feel like what I would love to see happen in the Jewish world is kind of like a broadening of connections to like people of color and working class people and labor unions and kind of people like kind of a wider swath of people in the world and I'd love to see us kind of making more unions, more connections, and kind of I think strengthening our connections with people outside the Jewish community. Um, I guess I'm saying that in part. I'm trying to cast it in a positive light, but I will say there are a lot of spaces that I go into Jewishly where I can feel that it's a lot of white people and a lot of wealthy people, and it can be uncomfortable. I think for people who aren't fitting into those categories. I know it's different in Israel, and there's certain like plenty of communities in the U.S. that kind of have their own pockets, but a lot of the places where I go play music. Um, I think that's just who the community is and where it's set up right now. And there's a lot of people figuring out really interesting things to change that and develop that and bring more Jews of color into central positions and leadership, which I think is great. And there's a lot of synagogues making relationships with um, churches and and black churches and lots of different kind of bridging divides. Um, and yeah, I think I just would love to see it more. It's probably something I would just love to see in society is people figuring out how to reach across class divides and racial divides. But I guess because the Jewish community is my community and it's the one that I feel like is family, that's sort of what I see. And I think honestly, now we're gonna get into a bigger conversation, which we probably don't have time for. But like I have a little bit of a Marxist perspective on the world, and I see more and more cracks in the capitalist structure that we have, like the Silicon Valley Bank thing locally recently, and I just think that it's going to be in our best interest as a Jewish people to be connected to large groups of people and have solid relationships, and to prioritize the relationships over money, over finance, over those kinds of things. So that's what I would love to see happen in the Jewish world. And obviously these, same things apply to what's going on in Israel. And that's like probably one of the hardest things to figure out in the whole world about how to bridge divides and figure out how to reach across and make relationships. But um, I'll just mention that it's been a really exciting week in Israel in terms of big wins for labor movements and progressives, and people doing demonstrating, and so I don't know. For me, that feels very inspiring and hopeful, and we'll kind of see how things continue to play out with the government and the will of the people, etc. Maybe we'll get a close up look in July.
Nachon. So yeah, I love it. So definitely reaching out to different demographics of people. How can we Kiru? How can we can bring them close or go to where they are, and more diversity is what I'm hearing from you, which I love.
Yeah, and there is already a lot of diversity within the Jewish community. So in some cases, it's just sort of like making relationships and making space for the people who are already in our community, but also I think reaching outside of the community, and I think some of the work, obviously it's to do it like building it organization to organization, but I think some of it too is just person to person, like figuring out how to have close friends that are come from different worlds from you and can expand your mind and help you grow and vice versa.
100% agree. I think it benefits everyone involved for sure. So, well, we're going to wrap up, but just want to bless you on your journey. That it should be very fruitful. You should connect to a lot of different types of people, and kiruv, meaning bringing them close to not only yourself, but to our tradition, and build bridges between different traditions. And that your Kickstarter should overflow with abundance. It should be an easy raise. And we will see you in the Holy Land in July. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you, my man.
Love you, Saul. Thank you for all that you do and the path you've paved for me and so many others that we get to follow in your footsteps. Great to be with you.
Amen.